come up in the last 48 hours. Senator Sanders, CNN reported yesterday that, and Senator Warren confirmed in a statement that in 2018, you told her that you did not believe that a woman could win the election. Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's a video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards.
Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
That's disgusting. That's outright disgusting. Ultimately, two people were in a room. One person says, he told me that a woman can't win. And to be honest, she doesn't say that explicitly. In fact, she doesn't really say what he said. Sanders is the only one that goes into saying, I said Trump was a bigot and a racist, and he was going to use whatever he could against a female candidate. Now, if she interpreted that as a woman can't win, she should say that, but she didn't say that. She kept it vague. All of these apologists that is trying to say, oh, Warren just misunderstood, or both of them just, misunderstood, or Sanders should have de-escalated, or Warren should. Nonsense. Sanders had to hit this powerfully. He had to put this down and make it very clear, I didn't say this. Warren had Mike moment, goes and said, you just called me a liar on national television. Essentially, how dare you not let me call you a sexist liar? You've never created contrast before in this election. Why are you doing it now? Astonishing, astonishing. Her campaign most likely leaked this. If her campaign didn't leak this, and if she didn't approve, at any point in the story, she could have said, this was a private conversation, Sanders is not sexist, and that wasn't the tenor of the discussion. She could have killed the story at any point along the way. She leaned into the story for political reasons. This happened 2 years ago, 3 weeks before Iowa, in the last debate before Iowa, before the election. Just so happened, information gets leaked to the press of the conversation that took place two years ago, where Warren is apparently telling people this. Now, I don't care whether or not Warren leaked the story herself. It does seem like her campaign leaked this. Otherwise, why would she lean into the story after the fact? All of this was staged. Ultimately, it hits the press. It hits CNN, the people who are going to be the moderators. CNN runs with the story. CNN, infinitely predictable, is going to ask Sanders about this story. Sanders' answer is infinitely predictable because Sanders has been powerfully putting this down, saying this is a lie, this never happened, etc., etc. He's had people come out and said the exact same thing. Warren leans into the story, fundraises off of the story, and essentially uses this as a platform to talk about this notion of whether or not a woman could win in an election, something that I make the point that she wanted to hit directly, using her friend as a prop in order to make that argument. CNN was ghastly in this debate. At one point, they asked Sanders, hey, Iran wants us to get out of the Middle East. You also want us to get out of the Middle East. What? I mean, they asked him at one point, it was like, hey, how are you going to prevent your ideas from bankrupting the country? Like, and this, where they ask him, did you say that to Warren? He says no. And he makes the point that it is utterly ludicrous that I would do that. A, she's there because she wants to get across to me that she's running for office. So the notion that she's asking me whether or not a woman could win, if she's asking that question, either she has doubts herself or she's using this as political ammunition because she knew you were gonna run at some point and she was trying to get you an awkward answer. On the other point to this though, it would be weird as all hell for Sanders to push for Warren to run in 2015 and then turn around and say a woman can't win. It would be weird for Sanders to know that Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes and then turn around and say a woman couldn't win. It would be weird for Sanders 30 years ago to say a woman could win, but all of a sudden now saying a woman couldn't win. It would be utterly bizarre for Elizabeth Warren to get across to Sanders as she's running for office and he tells her you can't win, or worse, a woman can't win. Meaning she's there to get across to him that she's running. It would be utterly bizarre for him to tell her, you can't win. It would just be strange. All of this would be strange. Not to mention one has a history of flagrantly lying. I'm talking about the Native American Elizabeth Warren, whose kids supposedly went to public schools when they didn't go to public schools, at least that's what she told that other woman, who worked as a corporate lawyer and lied about what she was doing in her responsibilities as a corporate lawyer. She has a history of flagrantly being dishonest compared to the guy who's not. So if you ask me, who do I believe Sanders. The catch here, though, is regardless of what I believe, the catch becomes, how does the public accept this? Meaning, what does the public think about this? Does Sanders get hurt by this? I mean, after all, this Hail Mary pass was put out there in order to damage him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have leaned into the story. She wouldn't have brought up a conversation that took place in private and used it as political opposition research, twisting it, mangling it into opposition research to hit her guy, to hit her friend. And by the way, at any point along the way, she could have contacted Sanders. She could have talked about this along the 2 years. She could have even accepted, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding where he's coming. None of that took place. All of this was to damage her quote unquote friend. Politically savage, politically treacherous, and CNN essentially allowed itself to be used as a prop for financial reasons for this very specific thing, meaning CNN was used as a prop, but Warren was the initiator. How did the public accept it? There's post-debate polling. I want to call it post-debate / post-Warren attack. Sexist liar attack. Polling. What do you think happens? Meaning, how do you think the public accepted this very specific bit of overt theater that is illogical on its face, that CNN at no point questioned, but many other networks did question and outright essentially saying Warren was lying? Sanders, post-debate polling, tops number one. Oh, and by the way, has more support from women as opposed to Warren. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal patron. I apologize. I'm dragging ass a bit today. I haven't been in bed in the past few days. It's a medication issue. But nevertheless, the news still needs to be done. Warren goes after Sanders in what I strongly suspect was probably shocking to one Bernie Sanders. Shouldn't have been shocking to Bernie Sanders if you were watching this channel, but it probably was. Nevertheless, the catch becomes, what effect does this have? The sexist attack has been something that Clinton used. Bernie Sanders is sexist for even being in the race. MSNBC uses it constantly. Bernie Sanders is sexist for being in the race with Elizabeth Warren. And they even at one point said, well, she has more plans. Her plans are more popular. She's ahead in the polls. So it's kind of sexist for him to even be in the race. Hey, how about this? He's more trusted on healthcare. He's more trusted on the economy. He's more trusted on immigration. Your person is not trusted at all. And beyond that, she's third and fourth in the polling. If she wants big structural change, she can just get out the race and support the guy who's going to actually do it and believes in it. And beyond that point, it is sexist and anti-Semitic for her to remain in the race when there is a Jewish male that has better policies, that is more trusted on those policies, and that is higher in the polling. Just saying. They started that, not I. But here's the catch. The public put Sanders number one. Let's, two polls first. Let's look at New Hampshire. So this is Emerson, New Hampshire polling. Sanders, 23%. Buttigieg, 18%. Biden, 14%. Warren, 14%, essentially fourth place. Look at something else though. Look at Klobuchar. Klobuchar is up to 10 points in this poll. That is astonishing. That is astonishing. Gabbard wasn't even on the debate stage, just pulling 5%. But Klobuchar has a strong standing. Now, I suspect that this is because Klobuchar in the last two debates, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think did all that bad of a job. She held her own. If I'm not mistaken, the debate before last, she put an outright shank in Buttigieg. But she's held her own well in these debates, and apparently it's showing. But Sanders, 23%, first place. I want you to see something in this. On healthcare, Sanders leads the field with 35%. Buttigieg trails significantly, receiving 19%, followed closely by Biden at 17%, while Warren has 12% support. This is healthcare. Now, keep in mind, at one point, Warren was all the way up here. Now, when she abandoned Medicare for all, which she did abandon Medicare for all, the public realized two things all at once. She comes out and says, I am not going to put a tax on anybody under the billionaire class to pay for the health care. Now, at that point, people thought, all right, this sounds a little dodgy. I mean, we expect to pay for our health care. I mean, health care is expensive. I mean, we're going to have to pay for it somehow. Meaning people had already had this notion that they were going to have to pay something for their health care. Nobody anywhere else in the world does this that Warren is talking about she's going to do. So right off the bat, there's a certain degree of skepticism just built into it. Not to mention she's tying in the military, she's tying in environmental, like all of this immigration, all of the stuff that she's tying in. She voted for Trump's military budgets, but now she's going to cut the military budget. Fair enough. My point is, when she put out that plan, and then she said, in 3 years, I'm going to fight like hell for Medicare for all. People realize, especially people who are rational, people who weren't necessarily rah-rahing Warren just to rah-rah Warren, they realized she wasn't being serious. Even Uyghur comes out and says, it doesn't seem like she's being serious. No shit, Sherlock. I've been saying it for months. You only had to look at her rallies. You only had to listen to her to get across that she wasn't for Medicare for all. She wasn't for it. She wasn't for it. My point is this. She went from pushing Medicare for all, where people actually believed her, I didn't, but people did, to now being in fourth place behind Biden and Buttigieg in healthcare. Look at this. She's only at 12% from the standpoint of healthcare. Also, healthcare was labeled as the single most important issue in the Democratic primary for Democratic primary voters. You want to know why Warren has collapsed in the polling, at the very least in this? Right here. Dishonesty. She was flagrantly dishonest. And she continues to say that she's for Medicare for all when the public at this point realizes she is not. The second poll I want to go to is Reuters. Now, Reuters has been doing these polls pretty frequently. Top-rated poll. Last week, Biden had 23% and Sanders had 20%. This week, post-debate, I'm only showing the post debates. Sanders, 20%. Biden, 19%. Warren, 14%. Now, this is a 3-point jump for Sanders. This is a 4-point decline for Joe Biden. This is a 3-point decline for Elizabeth Warren. Bloomberg goes up 1. Now, look at this. Bloomberg is at 9%. Bloomberg has spent over $200 million. Put that in context. Bernie Sanders, if I'm last I looked, had spent like $20 million. And he was the one who's been bringing in the most money. Now, a billionaire is effectively buying a race. Tom Steyer and Bloomberg, both of them have dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into television ads in these various areas. And you know, when they dump those ads like that, it creates a increase in the price, making it that much more expensive for other campaigns to buy those ads. This is kind of a cost, supply and demand type thing. You only have X amount of time frames that you can be running those commercials, and X time frame where those commercials are viable for people to see. I mean, after all, you don't want them running at 3 a.m. And so you have a fixed amount of bandwidth. And so if the billionaires are putting $200 and $100 million into television ads, then what about the other campaigns? It squeezes out the other campaigns and forces those campaigns to spend that much more money. Why? Not because they were getting this from support. This is not natural grassroots support. This is not the public clamoring for a billionaire. No, this is them dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into a primary to effectively buy that primary. They're buying this. This is utterly detestable. Why is this not disqualifying on its face? Especially in the Democratic primary. It also shows that there are lemmings out there that could be overtly influenced just because somebody gets on television and tells you something. Not just tells you something, but in a goddamn campaign ad where it is literally propaganda to get you to vote for him. It's false consciousness, man. I mean, why the hell would you go out and vote for a billionaire like this? Here's the thing. And Buttigieg peaked down 1. Warren still continues to collapse. Another thing to note, Sanders, and if I'm not mistaken, Bloomberg, both have gained steadily over the course of this polling, meaning they've gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. Tom Steyer is polling at 15% in Nevada. That's how he was able to get on the debate stage. Why? Because he took like $100 million and dumped it into ads and whatnot in the state. Bloomberg, billionaire, is essentially putting all of this campaign staff throughout the United States in order to get a huge campaign up and running. Only thing he had to do was have $1 billion in order to make that work. $100 million. Bloomberg could drop $1 billion in this primary and not even know the money is gone. Like, that gets across the level of wealth that he has at his disposal to run in this vanity project where he's just wasting hundreds of millions of dollars. It's utterly astonishing. But the key point to take away here is that attack fell flat. It was a dud. Warren went after him in this way and effectively put "who do you believe" on the line. CNN was so over the top and so atrocious that Sanders ends up raising massive amounts of money. He raised more on that day that CNN had that debate than any other day in this or any of the other debates. He put out, at one point, I think he said he was raising, there were like 250 donations a minute or something. I did the video the other day. It was utterly shocking, the amount of money that they were bringing in after this attack. They brought in over, I think it was $1.7 million within an hour of the debate on CNN. Not to mention, people had been donating because they were angry at what Elizabeth Warren was doing. You had other people trying to get their refunds from what Warren had done, meaning they were pissed off at Warren and they tried to get the refunds that they gave her. You had a lot of people, especially online, who would say stuff like, "I've gone from passively tolerating Elizabeth Warren to actively hating her. I mean, even people who were supportive of Warren as a second choice found this to be so flagrantly over the top that she burned their bridges. You have to question what goes on into the mind of an individual that would do this. And it does make sense if she's in this race, not as an ally, but she's in this race to stop him. Meaning, it was very clear that if Warren was going to get in the race and pretend to be Sanders, that she was going to sap away a certain amount of support from Sanders. Now, whether she's running as a thing unto herself or whether she was being pushed, I got to be honest, at this point, I think the question needs to be asked. Warren has allegiance to Hillary Clinton, or they were working behind the scenes. She wanted to keep that a secret. That's actually true. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton's husband, told Tom Perez, don't let Sanders take the party. On top of telling him, don't let Sanders take the party, if you remember, it was Obama and Clinton that pushed Tom Perez to run for that DNC chair. Keith Ellison was the person that was originally going to win that race. He was expected to win that race. Tom Perez came in at the last minute. And even in that, there was dodginess in the way that they were able to get Tom Perez in, because it was supposed to be like an open ballot and they were keeping those names secret. My point is this. It is very clear that the Democratic Party, the established order of the party, does push people to get into various races. Whether Steny Hoyer telling the guy to get out of the race because they already chose their person. The people who they were choosing all throughout the United States in these various districts, regardless of what the people in the district wanted, the establishment made their choice. Why wouldn't that be true for president also? And if you're Pelosi and Schumer and all of these people who are stop Sanders, and you know Warren is a creature of the party, you know she wasn't going to come off the Standing Rock. She's essentially shown her allegiance to Clinton by not coming out to support Sanders. Why wouldn't you try to get her to run, knowing that it will sap the energy of Sanders in this race? If your name is Hillary Clinton, do you try to push? Whether or not Warren believes she's running as a factor to herself, that may be true, but it's also true that other people who are around her have other priorities, those priorities being to stop Sanders. I hope you understand what I mean. When I'm asking this question of why is she in this race, what is her objective in this race? If she's in this race to be a friend to Sanders and an assistant in this kind of big structural change, she wants to be part of the movement and all this other stuff, then you don't do this. That doesn't take place in that context, because there are things that matter to you larger than the race itself, especially if you're going to put a knife and backstab one of your friends. Sean King reported that the people in her campaign said that she twists and embellished the story. The Washington Post reports that people who were aware of this conversation said Sanders never said that. Said that it would be ludicrous for him to say it because, after all, hey, I'm going to run for president. You can't win. Okay, I'll talk to you about this in 2 years, just before Iowa. It's ludicrous. This was done almost to injure him, using the very specific sexist angle that Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, and that many of these people in MSNBC uses. I think my question is valid here, and I think the question should be asked. Ultimately, she decided to use opposition research, a private conversation, in order to hit him and ding him like this. It's as if when she's running in the race and her sapping his energy and sapping away his support, allowing Joe Biden to exceed. When it becomes clear that that's not working, when it becomes clear that that's not enough to stop him, that it's very possible that he could still take these initial states, then you get desperate and do this. And then you get desperate and do this. If her objective in this race was to stop Sanders, then this makes sense. If her objective in the race is to effectively big structural change, she could potentially get a VP spot and all this other stuff, then you don't do this. If she is really a friend of his, if she's really on his team of sorts, then you don't do this. If she didn't want the story out, then you don't do this. If you did want the story to be a talking point, meaning something that's big for people to talk about and address and point to Sanders and sexist and all this other stuff, then you don't lean into the story. Then you don't validate the story. Then you don't fundraise off the story. Then you don't leak it to CNN 2 days before debate. I guess I'm making a point to you that her behavior in this gets across that this was, to some degree, a political ploy. All of this, it was just theater. And I'm asking, was this theater used in a service to try to hurt Sanders because her original plan of just sapping away his support wasn't going to be enough? I'm asking, why is she in this race? Because this behavior has to make sense in some context. And from the standpoint of whether or not she was going to be able to get points and all this other stuff or believed, this is a Hail Mary to say the least, but it's a Hail Mary to injure her friend. Quote unquote friend. I have super chats. Xavier Foster. Let's be real. Warren colluded with media here. Yes, she did. Oh, fuck yeah. I mean, look, politicians use media as props all the time. You have a source in the media that you leak stories to, that you have a relationship with back and forth. There are times where they may need information, in which case they can come to you. And there are times there are information that you need to get out, in which case you go to them. Once that relationship is open, it's like, hey, Elizabeth Warren told me that Bernie Sanders said that a woman couldn't win. I need to be anonymous, though. And then you go away. And then the media reports it. Now, this is the campaign working with the media. And what does the campaign say? Well, we don't really want to talk about this. But you leaked it. So clearly you want to talk about it. She's fundraising off of it. Clearly she wants to talk about it. She's leaning into the story. She's confirming the story. Effectively calling Sanders a sexist liar because Sanders is saying this never happened. She's the one that put the story out. Sanders defending himself, and she seems utterly shocked that he would defend himself against claims of sexism. I mean, come on. For fuck's sake. And by the way, even if he did tell her that, so what? I mean, if you're asking him, if he says, look, I think a woman has a hard time winning in this climate, so what? But fact of the matter is, I don't think he said it. It would just be so bizarre for him to say that. I'm going to run for president. A woman can't win. Okay. That just, it doesn't make sense on its face. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense on its face. Let's see. Brent McKinney. Oh, right here. Xavier Foster. Warren was never Bernie's friend. She's Clinton's. Yeah, she's Clinton's friend. They work behind the scenes. There's documented that they've been working behind the scenes in this campaign. She has a loyalty extending all the way back to 2013 when she signed that secret pledge saying that she wasn't going to run for office and she would give her support and allegiance to Hillary Clinton. That hasn't gone anywhere. That hasn't gone anywhere. Brent McKinney. Warren for new Astros GM. I don't watch baseball, so I don't know the significance of that one. Fan of fanfics. This is a great example of why we need to shut down the blue no matter who people. If Warren did this to her friend Bernie, what betrayal is in store for the faceless masses? Well, you've already seen one. The Medicare for All stuff. She brazenly and openly called that public option Medicare for All. And she did it constantly. And even after she put that plan out and everybody understood that there was no way that you're going to get Medicare for All in 3 years after passing a public option. There is no way that is going to work. You're not being serious. You're effectively lying. You're effectively lying. You wrote something down that is politically unworkable. You know it's politically unworkable, but you wrote it down and just called it Medicare for All. People with rational minds can look at that and say, you're most likely going to have a weaker Congress in 3 years. And even still, you're not going to get 2 bites at the apple. Think of Obamacare. Do you honestly think that they were going to get 2 bites at the apple on Obamacare, where they were going to be able to open up the legislation again in 3 years to make a massive, substantial change? And by the way, if you're going to take that huge lift, then the lift should be for Medicare for All. Not to mention, if you're starting at a public option, ultimately you're going to be negotiated down to something less than a public option. My point here is that the first betrayal is this. Do you know that in that last debate, she didn't even mention Medicare for All? And the language that she's using now is choice and that type of stuff. I was right the entire way through because I was just listening to her. I was just listening to her. And I was a bit more cynical or skeptical of her than the other ones. Marcus Will. Is it still too late for Bernie to endorse Warren? Marcus Will, I think that horse is out the barn. That horse is out the barn. That horse ain't coming back. That horse ain't coming back. I love that she's dropping in the polls. I gave her until March and she's out. Mark my words. I love it she's dropping in the polls too. That's her trend. And her trend for the most part has been that she's sliding. Now, it's possible that Warren is just this treacherous all on her own, where she thought, I got to do something. I'm floundering. I'm losing money in the fundraising. People, are discounting me. I'm having these food fights with Pete Buttigieg. Sanders is now in the number 2 spot and the number 1 spot in many of these early primary states. I got to do something. I got to do something. But is it worth your integrity to do this? Is it worth your integrity to do this? And did you honestly believe it would work? Meaning, yes, CNN was going to agree to this. But Sanders clearly was going to say this is BS. And he's going to explain what he said in the meeting. And the fact that you're being vague gets across that you're giving an interpretation. Meaning, pretend you and I have a conversation. We're one-on-one in the room. And you ask me, for whatever reason, you say, hey, do you think a black person can win? And I say, well, look, this country has a certain history about it. It would be difficult, for a black person to do that. And Trump would use all sorts of racist dog whistles and everything else. And then we start talking about something else. Then later on, you leak to the press that I said a black person can't win. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I never said a black person couldn't win. And when the media asks you, you say, he said it. I disagreed, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Now, what are you responding to? What you're responding to is my interpretation of what he said was this. But I don't want to talk about it anymore because if I talk about it and explain it, you will realize it's an interpretation. So I want to stop at the interpretation point because I can at the very least exist within the fig leaf that this is somehow not a lie because in my head I'm interpreting it in these terms. That's what I suspect this is. I mean, the middle ground between the two things is Sanders saying, no, I said he will use sexism as a weapon. The overlap is Warren saying he said X. Now the catch becomes, are you interpreting that? And I suspect that the political answer to this is yes, she's interpreting it. She doesn't want to talk about it any further because she wants to live in the interpretation, but not explain that it's an interpretation. Like, based on the way she has flagrantly disingenuously ran this campaign, I do not put this past her at all. And I strongly suspect, based on what Sanders was saying, based on what her camp was saying, when they came out in BuzzFeed with that article where they pulled back on the reins on what she was saying, based on Sean King's thing saying she has a tendency to embellish, even based on the Washington Post story, this is the people in the room saying Sanders never said that. He made the point of Trump being racist and a bigot and everything else and will use it against you. I strongly suspect that this has everything to do with her living in that bubble of fig leaf in order to say, he said it, I disagreed. What did he say? What did he say? What were the exact words? I don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry, she's massively disingenuous. Richard Wims, if she drops out, would this mean she lost her first election? I suppose it would, Richard Wims. I suppose it would. And you know what? Sanders won that seat. That seat had been held by a Republican for 177 years. 177 years. She made a ridiculous point in that debate about, X number of men lost all of these races up here and all this other nonsense. That's irrelevant. You're falling in the polls. You better come up with something better than that. And I suppose the better than that was to essentially put a knife in somebody that she considered, or at the very least called, a friend. Sanders was shocked as shit by that. She was shocked as shit by that. Fan of fanatics. Warren never became a Democrat. The Democrats just became Republicans. Also, the minute Trump is out of office, the left is going to go back to sleep. Yes, depending on who gets elected. Depending on who gets elected. Look, the biggest issue from the standpoint of the left, because we're all not on the same side, the biggest issue of Clinton getting in office is that half of the party, half of the country, goes to bed. Yes, she's horrible. But you're going to have Democrats who, for the most part, just back Democrats regardless. Think of Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann going after George Bush whole hog. Obama gets in office. He doesn't have much to say. If Trump gets in office, he's back. And now he's saying, that George Bush wasn't all that bad. I mean, they tend to follow their party like lemmings, almost like it's a football game. They're on that wavelength, so whatever the party says, they for the most part go along with. The value system is not necessarily there. It's all tethered and wrapped around whatever the party wants. This is the Russiagate nonsense. All of them just ran off the cliff with it. Yes, the Democratic Party moved. They moved. Clinton losing was the best case scenario for the left. I'm sorry. I know people, no, I don't necessarily like having Trump in office. And yes, Hillary Clinton would have did bad shit also. And we could have this conversation of, see, I told you that's why you shouldn't have voted Clinton when Clinton was doing bad shit. So, let's tamp down on that. My point here is the only way that you galvanize enough attention and enough public and enough angst is for her to lose. It delegitimizes third-way Democrats. I mean, for fuck's sake, Al Gore, John Kerry, and now Hillary Clinton, the last three right-wing Democrats. And Obama was different because Obama ran as a lefty. But the last three right-wingers lost. They lost. Yes, if a run-of-the-mill Democrat gets in office, an aspect of the Democratic Party goes to sleep. This way around, however, you have a lot of Democrats who want something more and for the first time have been given an option for something else. And that civil war had to take place. Go back, look at my videos. 4 months ago, I made the point that there's a Democratic civil war coming. You can see very clear signs of it in the way that the AOC, Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, even in talking to some of these people who say, we're not Democrats, we're just carrying the thing because we need the party apparatus. It had to come. Look at what the DCCC is doing. Look at what the DSCC is doing. Essentially putting sanctions on anybody that works with lefties if they're trying to take out an incumbent. Sanctions are an act of war. And if you are going to essentially blacklist or blackball various vendors for dealing with lefties, then those lefties are going to feel some kind of way. AOC decided to not pay her dues. God bless AOC. Why would she pay her dues? Do you realize that under the policy that they're going with now, AOC would have never gotten elected? She would have never gotten elected. Ilhan Omar would have never gotten elected. The entire point of the policy is to prevent more of them from getting in office. Yes, it's a civil war in real terms. You have a party apparatus that is tilting against Sanders. This is why I add credence to the potential that Warren could be working under the auspices of the party, working with Hillary Clinton in order to stop Sanders. It's like a proxy war. In the same way that, the United States helps, we put money or something in the hands of jihadists. Well, we're putting money in the hands of jihadists because they are helping us knock down a Syrian government, a sovereign country. The jihadis have their own ideology, they have their own things that they want, and they also want to take down the government. So these things dovetail into this kind of marriage of convenience. The U.S. supporting terrorists to take down Assad in a proxy war. Clinton and her relationship with Warren could be viewed in almost similar terms. Warren may have her own interests, but Clinton also has her interests. Bill Clinton has his interests. Obama has his interests. And all of those things dovetail in not letting Sanders get in office. Meaning, whether Warren is acting as a factor of herself or not, it's also clear that she's also being used as a proxy in order to take down Sanders, allowing somebody else to step over the two of them. The only person who this attack helped was Joe Biden. It's the only person. Oh, and yeah, Bernie Sanders, because it essentially backfired almost immediately. Her camp was trying to de-escalate. within hours. This is not going to hurt Sanders. The Native American in the race, or the woman that pretended to be a Native American and then flipped to white, not quite clear why that flip took place. That person is less trusted on this. She just is. Has nothing to do with her being a woman. It has to do with her being a flagrant, disingenuous liar of a candidate. And I don't know what she's like on the outside, so don't misunderstand me. But in this race, in this campaign, she has flagrantly pretended to be Sanders. He never hit her. He never attacked her. He never even created contrast despite what his public wanted. And her very specific policy was, I'm going to ape Sanders. But the only way that policy worked is if Sanders never hits her. If he never clarifies, he never makes it clear that she is full of it. She's full of it. She's making it up. Because he never did that, she's allowed to skate. And she, at one point, was eating his lunch. I mean, she had bumped up into the number 2 and number 1 spot. He never touched her. At his worst, at her best, he would have never, ever thought to pull some shit like this. It's fucking disgusting. Give props to Tulsi for sticking up for Sanders. Marcus, I did. I did. The moment I read it the other day. Friends are few. And that's why loyalty matters. I mean, you know, when I tell people, because every so often people will be on Twitter and they'll be like, hey, Tulsi said this. You don't like her now, right? It's like, my reasons for liking Tulsi are twofold. She's my sword on issues of foreign policy, and she backed my guy. Loyalty matters. Loyalty matters. Friends are few. And in the sense of Gabbard stepping down in order to back my guy, yeah. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't she get the benefit of the doubt just right off the bat for me in regards to my support? I don't, honestly, it's weird to me that this isn't the normal way of thinking about this in these terms. She was willing to take swords and slings for you. In the conversations about foreign policy, she's never attacked you. And not just never attacked you, gives you space to run on the left in regards to foreign policy. There are certain objectives that Tulsi has in this race. I don't necessarily think she's eating to his numbers, which is why I have no issue with her being in the race. And not just I have no issue with being in a race, she's an American. She can run if she wants. I guess I'm just making the point that I have no antagonisms towards her at all. And on the issues of foreign policy, mine is Kashmir. She tends to be my sword on that stuff. Mine is Bolivia. She's just slow on an uptick. But I hope you get my point. The conversation that she has on that stage is dramatically different than mostly anybody else on that stage with the exception of Sanders. She gives him space. She gives him space. Not to mention she backed my guy. All right, this video has gone monstrously long. Chris Mays, I'll tell you this. Bernie Sanders looked beside himself after the debates. He probably was angry. He probably was pissed off. I mean, think about it for the moment. He's naive enough to believe that that woman was a friend of his, despite everything else. And he may look at it in political terms. You know, she's doing what she has to do to get from point A to point B, etc. But this is a betrayal. You and I have a conversation, and even if you misunderstood what I was saying, what you said didn't leave room for that. Meaning, it didn't leave room for context. It didn't leave room for the caveats. It didn't leave room for any of that. Sanders didn't think a woman could win. I disagree. That's all I wanted to talk about this. Now, I just want to use the pivot to, now that you have this vague sense of Sanders as sexist, now I want to pivot to talking about something that I want to hit directly since you people brought it up. This is a fucking shallow show. I would imagine he was angry under that. I'm making another video about TYT. It'll be out in a week or so. Uh-oh, Garden making a video of TYT. What's the video about, Garden? Maybe AOC will break off from these people. Oh, as it stands, she's on the leash. You know, it's funny, right? Oh, damn it, I missed it. It's funny. You know, AOC made this point that if we were in Europe, I'd be in a different party. She's right. As a flat fact, she's right. A different party than Joe Biden. Many of them would be in a different party. It would be in a party that's to the left, either in Labor, and Democrats would be like Lib Dems, or some of those Democrats would even be Tories. So she's right. That didn't stop them from vilifying and attacking her, and some of them even told her to get out the party. Now, the fact that you're telling one of your top earners, one of your top eye-getters, what turned out to be a political force, and telling her to get out of the party, the question becomes, why are you telling her that? Are you telling her that because she's out of kilter in regards to policy? Or are you telling her that because you don't like the fact that she's attacking, at times, the party? Now, keep in mind, the reason she's attacking the party is because the people who put her in office with an idea that they want to have certain policies espoused upon the world. She can't do it by herself. She's not God Queen AOC, even though that's a little hot. But she's not God Queen AOC. Ultimately, if she's going to get anything done, she needs coalitions. She needs other people. You know, this is politics. This is not religion. That's not true. Politics is to some degree religion, or at least ideology is. But you get my point. She, by definition, needs other people in office with her. Means, by definition, in order for her to not be a liar, in order for her to actually get her policy prescriptions passed credibly, she has the primary. She has to work with organizations that would get some of those dinosaurs out of office. And it is not the responsibility of the DNC to protect those dinosaurs. The people in the various districts across the United States make a choice on who they want. It's put to the vote. The people who run in the race, the incumbents already have massive advantages. I need to take the extra step of sanctioning people who are running against your candidates? And beyond that point, if those people in those districts decide that they want something else above and beyond the incumbent, then that is fair game. It's politics. It's not a job in a sense that you keep it for 20 years. You're there as long as you can serve the public's will and credibly make the case for them to put you back in that office, or at the very least not have opposition that could take you out of that office. This also has a secondary effect that anytime a Democrat loses, it will be to another Republican, not to another Democrat. I hope you understand what I mean. If the DCCC or the DSCC come up with a policy that says any Democrat that tries a primary, another Democrat, and it only applies to lefties, but any Democrat that tries a primary, another Democrat, we're going to sanction the services and all this other stuff. We're going to do all that. You're trying to create a disincentive for people to go after incumbents. That means the only people that the incumbents are ever going to be able to run against are Republicans. That means the only time an incumbent can lose or a change can take place is from a Democrat to a Republican. That's utterly ludicrous. Your public may actually want something fundamentally different that you are blocking and stopping from taking place. And instead of that public getting the option of, let's say, a lefty, you give them the option of this dinosaur and a Republican. Oh, God, this is aggravating. When I go after the Democratic Party, I do it for reasons. It's not just for my fucking health. Animaxa. Woohoo! For long videos, another 8 hours, please. No 8-hour videos, no 8 hours. I honestly, this video was supposed to be like 15 minutes at the most. This video was supposed to be 15 minutes, Animaxa. Is AOC wrong on impeachment? If so, what was the price? AOC is wrong on impeachment. I think she is. But if you are AOC, though, and you're Hispanic, and you are part of the Trump deranged crowd, and you find Trump are putting people that look like you, that has a certain cultural heritage similar to your own, in cages. Literal cages. Trump goes out and makes the argument that not having toothpaste and not having soap still constitutes a sanitary situation. Women not having their pads and whatnot still constitutes a sanitary situation. It's nonsense. Those people were being put in cages. Babies ripped from their homes and ripped from their mamas. Some of those kids got molested. But it is infinitely foreseeable that those kids would get molested because there's always going to be some probability of sorts of that taking place the moment that you rip them away from their parents. If you're AOC and the president is doing that, would you be incentivized to try to rip him out of office and to make his life miserable? Now, if you remember, Nancy Pelosi didn't want to do this. Nancy Pelosi thought this was a horrible idea. And Nancy Pelosi dragged her feet for the longest time, but you had all of these people who were Russia fanatics, in the sense that, the Russiagators, and looking for any reason from day one to try to get Trump out of office. Now, she took this opportunity to go for it. She pushed extremely hard in that direction. Elizabeth Warren, being opportunistic, comes out as one of the first campaigns that says, yes, I believe we should have impeachment. At this point, you have Democratic candidates and you have the other factor in your own party screaming for impeachment. And you have all of these lunatics out in the public screaming for impeachment. What do you, as Nancy Pelosi, do? You have to feed red meat to the base. The catch here is what Nancy Pelosi was afraid of was that this was going to boomerang and backfire. And you were going to incentivize a lot of people who might have been dejected because of all of Trump's failures to get that much more involved into the political process because they think you're being unfair to that guy. You don't believe me? When Sanders was being attacked by CNN, when Sanders was being slandered and smeared by Warren in what seems to just be an outright lie against somebody she considers a friend for political effect, what happened? The amount of money that Sanders raised in that time frame ballooned. $1.7 million in like a day. And all of this had to do with, A, the slanderous behavior from Warren, but also the attacks being leveled that night at the debate stage on CNN. It didn't divide, it brought together. It was one of those things that unified. Think of terror bombings. One of the theories, political theories, or let's say military theories, this was maybe 100 years ago, was that if you bomb civilian targets, that the country would get so angry that they're being bombed and that they don't have their services and that their life is that much more difficult, that they would turn on the government and try to collapse the government. Now, this gave a justification for terror bombings. Meaning, if we're bombing Dresden, if we're bombing Berlin, if we're bombing these places into the Stone Age, if we're bombing North Korea, and we're killing a fifth of their population, maybe they'll rise up and take down their government. The catch here is that didn't work. I mean, even the terror bombings that Hitler was doing from the standpoint of Britain, it didn't separate the population. It, if anything, unified the population. The same thing is true with this. The moment that you attack him on something like this and it's so slanderous and it comes across as just so politically opportunistic to a degree that's just distasteful, it's just gross, then it's not something that it's an attack that can press through because the attack is nobody believes it or rational minds don't believe it. And so if anything, it just looks horrible. It looks scandalous. It looks like you're attacking somebody who's supposedly a friend of yours, and not just that, who's never attacked you. And it makes people that much more animated in the sense of solidarity around that person. Same thing with Obama. I had a guy, he said, I don't think blacks were ready for a black president. His point is, because of the way they were attacking Obama, the way the Republicans went after him, some of this stuff was just outright racist and horrendous rhetoric, that blacks surrounded them that much more. How can you criticize them when these other people are criticizing them in such harsh, vicious, vindictive ways that don't seem to go in line with the typical politics? Well, same thing with this. Same thing with this. She solidified support around him. And I strongly suspect this is going to backfire. I mean, this is backfiring massively. But I do think she's wrong on impeachment. I mean, if you're looking at something that can create a weird political situation, I mean, it creates an unpredictable situation, or it makes the situation that much more unpredictable because it's hard to know how the public is going to behave, especially his base, and how that much more animated they're going to be in regards to getting out to vote, as opposed to having a dejected base where you can make the argument that Trump failed, Trump lied, Trump said he was going to do this, but instead, this. You have this. But yeah, I think she's wrong on impeachment, Marcus. Honestly, no bullshit, Tulsi Gabbard had the better idea. Like, Tulsi Gabbard wanted to censure President Trump, but it was for a host of issues. Not this, it was Ukraine stuff. It was for a host of issues. For example, stealing the oil in Syria. Hey, there's a big one. Is the president allowed to just steal oil? Even if the president say he's protecting the oil from some random person, it's in somebody else's country. They have every capacity to protect that oil. Syria and the Russians certainly can protect the oil since they, for the most part, beat back ISIS. It's theft. It's just theft. But doesn't impeachment hurt the country overall? Yes, Marcus will. I think so, yes. I disagree with her on this. I've been against impeachment from day one. I mean, ultimately, they have no human source for this. Sonderland is their person. That's the person who supposedly gave over that notion of, hey, there's going to be a quid pro quo. The problem is Zelensky said it didn't happen. The person who Sonderland was talking to said it didn't happen. And so it's like, all right, well, the people who you're saying you gave this to said that it never took place. And the president of the country is saying it never took place. And so what are you using? You didn't call those guys. I mean, they were talking to the guy in Time magazine. He said, nobody called me to testify. Yeah, I wonder why. They didn't like what you were going to say. I do think it hurts the country overall. I just do. How can you not impeach George Bush? Meaning Nancy Pelosi comes to this conclusion that she's not going to impeach George Bush. However, she finds it completely necessary to impeach Donald Trump over this. Overstepping the bounds of the president, and then obstruction of justice. Now, I have to be honest. If I'm president of the United States, I'm not working with the Democratic Congress either. You guys are flagrantly partisan in the way that you're trying to go after me and take me out of this office. No, I will not work with you. You do what you need to do, and we work this out from there. It's going to be an antagonistic relationship because you've made it antagonistic in the way that you've gone after me. Yes, Trump is gross. Trump is an ogre. By the same token, let's be honest. They had it out for impeachment from day one. They never accepted the election results. They screamed it was Russians from jump, as opposed to dealing with the fact that they fucking lost the reality shows. You lost. All right, I'm going to end this because this is gone for like an hour. And like I said, I have to go. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks, everyone. Be right back.